Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Transformation Whisperer series, this podcast series that we're putting together to be able to find out the real facts and the real things that we are held up with when it comes to digital transformations. And so we've got a couple of guests here today, which we'll introduce as we go along. But this series is about finding out and being able to ask those questions where we actually get some information we can actually act on. It's not about sort of creating fear. It's not about saying this is a problem and then not giving us any answers to be able to deal with it. The aim is to be able to say, well, what is out there? What can we do? How can we find something that will actually solve our problem? And so we're creating a series in the Digital Transformation Whisperer where we're actually looking at SAP. And SAP is probably at this stage is one of those things where it's been in the market, been in the media, sort of saying that they will be stopping support for their ECC program in 2027. And there's talk that it might get extended to 2030. It's already been extended once. What does that mean? There's probably a huge amount of SAP ECC customers out there all going, what do we do next? Which step do we take? And so it's a fearful thing because, often they've been involved with these programs for 20 odd years. And so how do they then take on what new technology offers and how do they get more comfortable with that? And that's why we've got Erin and Keith here today. And so Erin and Keith are from DAS Consulting Australia. And, I've worked with Keith in the past, and it's interesting to be able to see how they are tackling, how DAS is actually tackling this challenge. There's a major organisation here in Australia that's actually looking at it, taking it on, and so that's why I thought it's worthwhile that we start to learn a bit more about what this is all about, and we could talk to Keith. So, Keith, you've been around SAP projects for a number of years now, and we've got SAP S4 HANA is becoming SAP's preferred option to go to. So, ECC customers are saying, well, is that what we should do? Should we not? There's a hesitancy because we've got probably, I think the last count, there was about 70% of SAP customers sitting out there, sitting on the fence saying, I don't know what to do. I'm halting my project, or I'm waiting to go ahead. I'm waiting to see. And so, it's one of those things of concern. So for you, what's your feeling? You're in that game. You see it around all the time. So what are you feeling?
Yes, well, it was generally put out there that over the last few years, there's going to be a huge rush to S4 HANA, and you better reserve your resources now. But I haven't actually seen that occur. So the first thing I would say is, if you're on ECC, why would you replace something that works for you? So, but SAP has an increasing array of technologies and functionality. Well, you may be replacing ECC because you want to chase that. However, not all things SAP are built by SAP. There's a lot of third-party companies out there who provide things that SAP doesn't provide, or they provide things that they see better than what SAP can provide. So can these technologies you're chasing be provided by a third party? There is ECC support in the marketplace. Personally, I haven't looked at that, and don't need to, but there are companies around that say they will support ECC into the future. And that's a key thing. If you're going to stay with ECC, somehow you need to have it supported.
Yeah, you're right.
The other thing is, this is a major segue in your ERP journey because, okay, imagine these companies that have been on SAP since the 1990s. They've been doing scheduled upgrades all the way through. What has that given them? Are they satisfied with the service they're getting from SAP? Or do they need to now say this is the time we need to consider whether we're going to keep on the SAP journey or we're going to look elsewhere?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think that at this point, many customers of SAP sort of thought that they would, SAP customers thought that, or SAP itself, sorry, actually thought that people would just go, well, you're SAP, we'll just take this upgrade. And I think that we've seen a fair few of those train wrecks that have happened where it's not just a technical upgrade anymore. There is a difference to it. And so, what is better out there? What's not? And again, many would be asking that question. I've finally perfected my ECC. I have people using it. It gives me what I want. I've done a lot of work on it. And now you're asking me to change. And so how do I see that future? What does that make it for me? So the thing that often you see with SAP customers is you talk about is to say, well, I'm comfortable. Now I'm being forced to move. Is there anything out there other than S4? And these are those questions that are swirling around in their heads. And so do you see the same thing of why SAP customers are hesitating to make that move?
Well, to a certain extent, yes, because any ERP vendor is locked into this continuous development cycle, especially these days with the rate of change of digitalisation products. So they continually have more to offer, and generally customers can't keep up with that. And other organisations such as SIs, can they keep up with it? Can they afford to keep up with it?
Yeah, it's a constant evolution now, isn't it? Where one time we would set and forget as such. So we'd buy it, we bought licenses, it was our right to actually access it. And probably as you think back a little bit further back, we had it on premise. So we had a server sitting in someone's room and we were in control of it. All of a sudden now the dynamic has changed in the sense that we're starting to say, well, let's go to cloud. Let someone else host it in a different data center. And what does that mean? Can we host our ECC on HANA? Yes, we can. But that's not where SAP wants to stop. They actually want to get to the point where you're actually using that new platform, which is S4, which is probably written for HANA. As that relational database that sits there, and it's much bigger. It's more than just a digital server room that sits in someone's next to someone's office. It's much bigger, isn't it?
It is, and the cloud technologies were looked upon as sort of a silver bullet when they first came to market. It was very cheap. You couldn't argue that it was not secure. But as technologies from the good guys have advanced, technologies from the bad guys advanced too. So then with the cloud, what you also need to consider is your security footprint within that cloud. How secure is it? But from SAP's point of view, it's so much easier for them to support one cloud product. Plus, it's easier for them to provide improved solutions from that cloud product.
And you raise a really good point. It's often one of those things software vendors are working towards, in the fact that long time ago it was about you can customize and you can love this thing and you've got licenses, whereas the model changed. All of a sudden we have subscriptions. And those subscriptions now allow us to be able to have access, but the cost of maintaining it when we had licenses where people went and customized the thing to as much as they possibly could, for me to put an upgrade in, I broke things. And so I needed to do a lot of testing and a lot of those things to be able to put in enhancement packs. That's costly. And so the thing is now for them is their own self-interest says, well, let's put in something that we can just push out, like an Apple app, like those sorts of things. We just update it in the background. Everyone will be happy. If only business worked that way. It doesn't work that way because we've got processes that hang on that. We've got other systems, as you mentioned. It's not just the SAP system anymore. We've got all these other systems feeding in and giving us information or taking information from us. They break, and those integrations break. Those connections break, and so it's not just a simple thing anymore of doing that. And so that's the hesitancy that we see is it's not just a simple flick the switch, let's go to something else.
Yeah, and circling back a bit, for long-time users, they may not have gone for an industry solution, because industry solutions and the number of them and the functionality within them has increased over time.
Yes.
So some users may be at a point where they're just running ERP, whereas now they've got the chance to move to S4 HANA and go with an industry solution.
Yeah, and let's just think what an industry solution is. That's what the software vendors do, is group a series of modules together that sit with the ERP to actually give extra functionality. Whereas in the past, what we did in the old days, we'd actually put the ERP and then we'd try and link these modules or write code to actually make the functionality work. That's essentially what happened, isn't it, Keith?
Yeah. And that all became difficult to maintain and expensive.
Yeah, because everyone writes a different code. They got a different way of doing things, and makes it really, really hard. So Erin, we'll bring you into the discussion. So recently, I saw an article about SAP simulation tool, and it's the aim of it, as I understand it, is that it actually helps people move to S4 HANA. And so can you share with me a bit of and DAS Consulting Australia was the company that I saw the article about. So that's why I've reached out to you guys. What's it all about? What's it do?
Yeah. So Wayne, there's lots of simulation software out there on the market. This one's fairly unique. So it's ERP Sim by Baton Simulations, who are based over in Canada in Montreal. So they've got a fairly large footprint in the university sector with this simulation software. And they also just speaking to what you and Keith were just talking about, they work really, really closely with SAP, because I think that's something that going forward with S4 HANA, people are going to have to really investigate how any vendor who does these add-on apps, how close are they working with SAP for those upgrades and things so that things don't get broken. So that's something that I suppose would be reassuring to the market as well, is that they do work really closely with SAP. Now, what the difference is, so SAP does have Enable Now, which is their own simulation, but that's more about clickology. So you go in and you click here and you click there and you look for your help. It's not as frustrating as the old paperclip system that always used to come up, but it is you've got to click here and click there to find where you're going. I'm having trouble. So with the simulation for ERP Sim, it's more around gamification. So it's about looking at how do adults learn, and adults learn better by doing, because unfortunately we're no spring chickens anymore and we don't just absorb knowledge like we used to. So we go through, and it's a competitive environment that uses a lot of different industry business cases to build out a live simulation that you're going through, and you're competing against other people in the team. So one of the situations with this is that it teaches you through experience in a live simulation, as opposed to go through, I can't find where I need to go, I click here, and then I go through, and it's also nowhere near as bad as the old classroom learning that everyone used to have to go through. So with this, it is really, really, I suppose it is probably the only one in the market that can do this and can help with the S4 HANA transition. So it's a way that people can have a look at what S4 HANA actually looks like before they get in there, and have a bit of a feel and a play around with it. But it also shows that these are the kind of solutions that are being developed for S4 HANA to move forward with. So the market is out there assuming that people are going to go forward with S4 HANA, and that they are going to actually eventually do the upgrade. And these are the new offshoots that are coming from, I suppose, that market assumption.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's a really great idea, because many times the only way that people could actually experience or think about moving to S4 was we'd get a very polished SAP pre-sales team come out, and they'd do a demonstration, and we might ask them, we might say, well, can you show us this? Can you see how this works? In the background, we've got a really, really well-curated data set that's sitting there. So everything just seems seamless. And then we get into it and we go, this isn't what we thought. and that's the problem. And so this, and that's the thing that seems that this simulation.
Yeah, that's right. And because it is based on industry and business objectives already. So we're already looking at different scenarios. So we're looking at logistics scenario, an enterprise asset management scenario, a public sector, disaster relief, logistics, manufacturing, distribution, defense and security, sustainability. So they already have those kind of off-the-shelf COTS scenarios for people to have a look at and use. And there's a lot of things that it can be used for. So it can be used for, obviously, to have a look-see to see how things are going with S4 HANA and what the difference is, but also as part of the design process as well for people to transition over to S4 HANA. So it's a really good idea to have a look at, as Keith mentioned, the industry-specific solutions that have come out. They are more of a newer thing and a bit different. So it's a good way for people to experience those off-the-shelf industry-specific solutions that are already available through SAP. And then if there's any customization that's needed, it's kind of a springboard almost that you would use to prepare your project teams, to prepare the design, as well as to follow up with the rollout with the change management side of things, the organizational change management side of things, and getting people and accelerating that transition to S4 HANA. And then you've got your training applications for it, custom scenarios. There's lots and lots of different things. It's really exciting. And the best part about it is it's not aimed for people like yourself, Wayne or Keith, who have been around and used an SAP and being part of design teams and have all this experience. It's actually aimed at people such as myself who are coming in at that more executive level as well and having a look and will this fit in? Okay, I understand how this system works. Hand it over to the project team and go, okay, so we're preparing on this. What do our actual systems look like compared to what we can just go and buy? So it's a lot. It's very exciting. It's very exciting. Yeah.
It does sound very exciting. And one of the things that I think where I've seen, and I've been involved in S4 rollouts before, and some of the challenges you find is that in the past, we had people using transactions in SAP, and you had the backroom people that knew how to use all those transactions, do those sort of things. They were the go-to people. And we had the other people just putting stuff in. Today with S4, we want people to actually use the system. And I think the big difference with software as a whole, whether it doesn't matter which platform it is, the intent is to actually use the system. And for our own experience, we've actually done some evaluations on systems when they're looking to change out. And you find that very few people really use the system. They love a spreadsheet, they love those sort of things. And so how do you get people who are new to SAP? And the big thing that often we would hear when we're doing evaluations of SAP is, I hate SAP screens, they're awful. S4 is not that. S4 is really easy to use. The user interface is a lot easier. But behind that user interface is, I've got people doing tasks. That's not old SAP in any way. And so what you're talking about here really sounds like it helps people go, here's how I would use this. And I really get the true experience. Like if I'm doing my part of a process, here's how I would do that. And is that what you're talking about?
It is. So I would liken the difference between using DOS. I know there's probably a lot of listeners out there who aren't old enough to remember DOS, but using DOS versus using a Microsoft interface. So when you're speaking about that old system with SAP, where there was an assumed amount of coding knowledge or a lot of intensive training around that, because let's face it, the interfaces weren't exactly user-friendly. The new S4 HANA interfaces are much more user-friendly. That's not to say that they're not overwhelming when somebody walks through the door and sits down in front of it having never used SAP before, because it is quite overwhelming. But that's where ERP Sim comes in, because it basically takes away the fear factor before you're actually using the organization system. So then that way you are having a play around and it's a safe place to fail. So we can have a look, we can click here and we can click there. Each scenario has its own winning objectives. So with the disaster relief, you're trying to build up public sentiment, and that's a high level kind of scenario where you're going from end to end business process. And then you get into the more specific scenarios around logistics or the enterprise asset management scenario or manufacturing, where you have more specific business department kind of objectives on how that's going, on how you win that game. But it takes away that fear factor, and it allows people to see what SAP is actually capable of doing. And by taking away that fear factor before people are learning about SAP, you are increasing your chances that people will use the system. Because I agree with you, Wayne, like people do not like to use systems that they're put in front of. Everybody always reverts back to Excel. And it's really, really difficult to shift that mindset. So by having the simulation software, ERP Sim, you are helping shift that mindset, but you're also helping shift the mindset of your project teams and your decision makers as well, because it shows the capability of that off-the-shelf system. And as we all know in the OCM world, we all talk about how it's much easier to change an organization process than to change the software to meet the process. But people don't do that. That's not human nature. This is how we've always done it. This is how we're always going to do it. Even if there is industry best practice scenarios and software out there, people still go, oh yeah, but ours is better. That's our competitive advantage, or things like that. So it lets everybody know right at the outset what this system will do if you just take it off the shelf and you just use it. This is what it is. And then that way people are more familiar with that process, and then they can naturally and intuitively compare it to their current organization process. And hopefully that two can at least come towards the middle. So that's an exciting.
Yeah, and you did right. You know, it is, and it's in. I've been a trainer, so I've actually trained SAP, large scale SAP. And one of the big things you find is people are fearful about pushing the button because they don't know what's going to happen. Whereas when you're in a game like that or a simulation like that, all of a sudden I can play with it and I can actually then see what happens without, this fear that the black box is going to fail at the background and the back end. And so it sounds like a really, really good way to be able to experience and try. And obviously as we've learnt to learn better, doing is a better way to go about it. Doing and experiencing is much, much quicker. You remember it. It's really, really good to be able to do that. But one thing that interests me then, and so for SAP, they have an approach that actually rolls out SAP platforms as such. And I think the latest one they call it is SAP Activate. And they have, 6 weeks of discovery, and then we come and we build a design, do that sort of stuff. Does this fit in front of that? Where does that fit in the the implementation or deployment approach that SAP rolls out?
Well, this is something to be considered. SAP Activate is SAP's latest methodology, and it's very comprehensive and it's good. But with today's pressures of timelines and costs, some shortcuts are made. And of course, the probably number one, number two on the budget hit list for a project is training and OCM. But the SAP Activate is not one thing. There's 3 pillars supporting it, and they have SAP best practices, which align with their best practices as expressed in their software design. They have guided configuration. So, Wayne, you may be able to remember back to the old days, around 3.1, and that where there was a system where they pre-configured for an industry, which didn't quite take off, but they now have guided configuration to accelerate your implementation, so you're not starting from scratch on all your configuration. And you have the Activate methodology itself. The Activate methodology includes what is termed simulation. I love the term she used, clickology. That's wonderful. That clickology, that's what the simulation is within SAP's methodology. That is not what ERP Sim is. Sometimes the vendor calls it a flight simulator for ERP.
Yeah.
And what it does aligns more with that expression. And when you use ERP Sim, the idea is to take you from familiarization through to competency in understanding ERP. The whole thing was built on the premise of we're going to have people experience ERP. They just so happened to pick SAP as the platform to do it. But in using that platform in an ERP simulation, you can put anyone in front of a screen. And what we've found is that we call it sports ground rules. So you'll leave your authority at the door and then join a competitive team. Now, when we run these simulations, we have our facilitators sitting in the backgrounds in team rooms and everything so they can listen and pick up if a team is having a problem and suggest what the problem was caused by. Now, it's really an experience to see this through 4 rounds where first round, they're still scared to touch the keyboard. And then we bring them in and comment on what's happened and make some broad suggestions to all the teams. And then that's when they first get the inkling. Well, if we did this, we could win. Cool. Yeah. And as it goes through, sometimes it gets into probably an all-out brawl at team by the fourth session when everyone's competing for the prize. So it's a wonderful thing to watch. And quite often people say, that was fun. Can we do it again? Now, when have you ever heard that with SAP before?
Well, never. And it's interesting that you say that. It sounds like, if anybody's listened to me over the years, the one thing I talk about is readiness, being ready, understanding what you're entering into. This looks like interactive readiness. And so for me, it's one of those things that it's about isolating the activate methodology, because yes, they do have a simulation type concept in there, but that's when you've already done the thinking. You've already really, you're a bit clearer on how you want to do things. And what this seems like is it gives you that clarity to actually work that out, and like you say, by the 4th time, people have worked out, here's the best way to get to this point here. And all of a sudden you start to get best practice, the way to use it, simplest ways, and being able to use it in its common form, not I need to actually change this to be this because, I'm unique as such. And that's got to be a great advantage.
Yeah, we can put from C-suite down the shop floor into one of these teams with our sports ground rules, right? And they experience the value chain in action in SAP, because as you know, you create your transactions, put your transactions together for a business process, put your business processes together for the value chain. So if you have someone from the C-suite there watching all this happen and actually playing in the game, it's a light bulb moment for them. Oh, this is what we bought. And now I understand what's going on. Now, that's got to be a big boost, because one of the common failures in SAP implementations is you don't get the backing from the top.
That's right. Executive buy-in is so difficult to achieve. And I've even rolled out, when we've rolled out SAP in the past, you'll give the access to the leader at the end. They get their profile that they can actually access certain things, and they go to the PA. Can you go off and get this stuff for me, sort of thing? Because that's the way that they've used it in the past. What you're saying here is all of a sudden they're actually experiencing it and using it. So moving forward, when it actually gets rolled out, they'd probably be able to get those own reports and actually interact with the system.
Yeah. And one thing you find, one of the important byproducts of this is the collaboration it builds. Mm. So if you have like a team of warehouse guys, that's one thing. But if you have like a warehouse guy with the CEO, and they actually build collaboration between themselves by working in this team, that's just brilliant.
Oh, you build trust, you build competence, and the one thing that you actually do widen, and having worked in the change space, is the fact that if you've got people that actually go, this is good and it works this way, and it's almost they become advocates, and people internal are better advocates than project people who come along and tell you it's going to be great,
Yeah.
and on the day be happy, it'll be fine. If they've actually experienced it, all of a sudden they become advocates and share that across the organization. And so change seems to be, we would be benefiting from using this sort of thing. Is that what you see?
Yeah.
Well, it is what we see. It has many different facets. But in a nutshell, one of the use cases for ERP Sim is for OCM. Use it as an OCM tool. There's other use cases, but it's definitely an OCM tool early in the program.
Yeah, I can see that. It answers many of those challenges that you have, having rolled out these SAP programs that they've struggled with in the past, and some of those have been successful along the way for their own reasons. People have put a lot of effort in, but it could have been simpler. It could have been a lot easier, and it would have been a whole lot easier when you went live, that you didn't take the next few months going around and convincing people or sitting next to people saying, here's how you use it, here's what you need to do, because they've already got that experience and they can actually share that by doing those gamification type simulations ongoing. I would imagine that's the sort of thing that would stay there with the business.
And as you know, OCM takes on many images. This is practical OCM.
And to me, that's the best OCM. I always find when people come in and they put a badge on you and say, you've just been changed because I'm the change manager, it doesn't really last too long. It's like your birthday badge. It only lasts for a day. Whereas if you've actually experienced it, that stays forever. And that's one of those things where user adoption really then promotes and goes exponentially, improves, and that's what you want when you're putting in a new ERP system.
Yeah.
It really provides the
all right. So
it provides.
Yeah.
Sorry, it really
I was going
to say it really provides the why, because a lot of the time when you're speaking about people on the workshop floor, this decision's been made that many levels above them that they don't know why. Why are we actually doing this?
Yeah.
So for that to help diffuse down into the organization, it's really, really important. And because people who make these decisions, sometimes I think they forget that organizations are their own organic being made up of people with all of their foibles and inabilities as well. I'm hating to sound like an OCM person here, but that's what it is. It's one of these things where it's a really good gap analysis on your workforce, because all of a sudden you can see if there's any further training around technology that's needed before you actually go live, and then people don't know how to use that particular workstation or do that kind of thing with the system as well. And so it's taking that organizational goal and the adoption of the organization goal and bringing it to that individual level and bringing the individual up to actually endorse and be an advocate for the organizational goal. And if you get enough people believing that, and it just magically starts to develop its own messaging and its own speed throughout the organization. So, but that comes back right from the project start as well.
It does, and having been in the world of actually training people, you get there and you'd be training people in the how to use the system. And I would have a test system I'd be using, and if we were using mobility, we'd have it all set up so we were able to be able to run them through and falsify a simulation as such. But often the question would ask is just as you said there, why? Why did they make this decision to design it this way was often the thing. And the other problem that they would have is say, well, so now we're doing it this way. Are our policies and procedures and those sort of things going to change? But if we've actually got the executives in there, we've got all those. So all of a sudden that becomes the spin-off effect of saying, well, now that wouldn't make sense for us to have a policy written that way when we're actually going to do it this way. We're going to standardize what we do. And so there's many, many facets that actually it seems like it would actually enhance, improve, give visibility of.
Yeah. And more than that, as the attendees are experiencing this event, what they're actually doing is they're seeing what their decisions have affected.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. And that's an important factor, because many times, when you're in isolated design, or you're doing unit testing and those sorts, or unit design, you look at it from the narrow focus, not that end-to-end focus. And from what it sounds like, you're actually running through particular scenarios which are end-to-end, not just this silo-based view that many times, that's what designers look at. They look at this piece and that piece, but we don't get to see what's the flow-on domino effect of that down the track. And so, and that's often where we get failure coming from. Is we get people where they go, well, I don't want to use this. It doesn't make sense, because all of a sudden you've got all these silly things happening because we made this decision, or we're doing it this way up front. So,
and that's where that time compression comes in. So that time compression and making sure that everybody is, and also moving people out of their comfort zone as well. So you might have somebody who is in the executive who's now having to do procurement or the allocation role, or one of the other different roles, so then they can experience something that they wouldn't normally see in their day-to-day. And that all of a sudden gives them their why. Oh, that's why Margaret's always saying that this never works properly. That's why. That's what she's talking about there. So that's one of those situations too, where there's a lot of in-depth internal value that people get out of ERP Sim, and organizations get out of ERP Sim, that is hard to articulate until you experience it.
And it's interesting, because probably the SIs wouldn't, like you're saying, they wouldn't like this thought. But when you're actually going in and you're actually negotiating your statement of work and saying, well, here's what we actually roll in after you've done the ERP Sim stuff, you actually could define it and say, well, our design is probably nearly there as such. And so when we're actually doing that first testing, we're actually already giving you a really, really informed view of what we're looking at. We're at a level of maturity as the organisation to have reviewed our processes and looked at those sorts of things. And so that compression time you talk about of deployment, from the time of solution ideation to the point of actually rollout, from my mind, from what I'm seeing here, it would be less as well. And so all of a sudden that risk of, oh, we missed this bit, or the cost is now blown out because of that, or we've got a change request that we need to actually put in because we didn't really tell you that this design had a lot more detail in it, and those are the problems where we see failures happen. And, in the expert witness stuff I do, that's often where the wheels fall off, the design part. We saw it from this perspective. We didn't really understand the consequence of that. And what this is giving us is the consequence, like you say, in a safe format.
And I mentioned before different use cases, and that's sort of what you're alluding to. It's common. It is used by some organisations as a sales tool. It's used for familiarisation. It's used for OCM. It can be used for things like advanced design experiments. I think it's particularly useful if you see this before you go into S4 HANA, so you know what you're getting. And there's other use cases out there that we've heard of, like for internal promotions. Okay, I need to promote someone into this position, so I get the 4 candidates for that, set them off, and who wins the game wins the position.
Yeah. And so, gee, it really sounds like an interesting tool, and it's great that it's actually come about, because, I think as over the years we've learnt more about how we get people to be involved and how we get them to be engaged. This sounds like a great mechanism for being able to do that. It also helps, in my mind, the ability to be able to get that comfortable feeling about what I'm entering into, because today, when my SAP salesman comes in and he talks about what we're going to do, everything's easy, but we know that that's not the case. And if we look at the media that's out there, it's not the case. We need to do something to understand what it means, the why, the how does that really work sort of stuff, so we can get the best option. And out of that, we find usually it's a standard way of going about a process, isn't it? We don't need to actually have all of these other different type customizations built into the system. There may be some unique things that you'll look at, but probably less than more. Whereas in the past, it was, I needed to make it look exactly like I wanted it so no one else would do it. And that was a competitive advantage. No longer, I think, is that's the case in software. I think it's really about how do I get the most out of it? How can I use it the best? How do my people actually use this thing? And the information I then get out of it, I can trust because they're using the system, not a spreadsheet. And I think that's what I'm hearing from what you're talking about here.
Yeah, and if you think about, once again, going back to last century when you and I were practicing, you think about the design was all about getting the business advantage.
Yeah.
And to get the business advantage, you had to do things better. And if you're using one system, you had to change that system. Now, the ideal has always been with an ERP system is the unbox it and throw in your master data, do some training, and away you go.
Yeah.
Well, I think these days that like with different solutions, SAP solutions for industries, the way it's used is going to be more similar across different companies.
Yeah.
So perhaps you lose competitive advantage there, but the one untapped competitive advantage you have is your people.
Yeah.
So if you get them up to speed quickly and confident in what they're doing, confident in design, then you get the competence you need for them to go ahead and make great business performance changes.
Well, that's interesting because one of the things we see often where we're saying that productivity is going down on a downward trajectory, and I think that often it's because we've got such complicated systems in our businesses, the way we work. We've built up this complexity over time, and as we've changed roles, we've changed people. We haven't really ever fixed what the problems were. We just brought more people in to learn bad habits, and so by putting software in, it is an enabler if we get it right. And I think that understanding it, using it, and using something like you talk about, an industry-focused version of what the software is, that really makes it the why become a bit clearer. Because often when we're just putting in a bland ERP that's basically finances and procurement, it doesn't make sense for some of the things we do. When we've got some of those other modules that we're linking to, when we see the flow effect of what each of those modules and the processes that sit with them, then it makes sense. And all of a sudden, that's where productivity should rise because we know how to use it, it makes sense, and it's software that's going to return a value to us.
And they know why they're doing it.
Yeah, and that's it's really good to hear that obviously someone's starting to break these barriers because. I'm sure that those people are sitting at ECC with ECC and they've actually started a project and stopped a project. They're going, well, wow, this is a lot bigger than we thought it was, not what we believed it would be. Yeah. How do we actually get to the point where it becomes achievable? It's bite-sized chunks we can actually deal with. And so that's what this sounds like. It sounds like something that offers that opportunity for organizations to be able to try before they buy, or try before they actually make the mistake. That's the key thing. Yeah.
Another use case, why are we doing it like this? Why don't we do it like that? Well, let's try it out.
Yeah. And process re-engineering is what I'm hearing out of that. And so, and often that's what we need to be able to do because what we had 20 years ago, the way we operated, is no longer the way we would operate today. There's lots of different things that actually change. So we need to build that different context. We need to look at how we would operate in this new environment as against what we would do in the past as such. And so, like you say, that gives us an opportunity to re-engineer, to actually try those processes, see what that makes sense to do, sort of thing, instead of just carry over that baggage that we've had and built up over those years.
Yes.
All right. It's been a great discussion with you guys. I've learned a lot, so thank you very much. It's one of those things you can be around forever, like I feel I've been, but you don't know, you never know enough. And so talking to you guys, I've learned something new today. So thank you very much.
No, that's okay.
And so I suppose one of the things for DAS Consulting Australia, you guys are the only ones who provide this in Australia, or do you do APAC? What do you do?
Yeah.
No, we're we're partners with Barton Solutions, and we've generally got the brief to go out and prosper in APAC.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
So, and
Erin,
with
you were going
that,
to say something?
with that, Wayne, if anybody is interested, we are in January. We are launching the new year's worth of open sessions, which are 2-hour sessions. So the session lacked, so that people can sit in and have a look at what ERP Sim is all about. And then if they're interested in any further demonstrations, or they think there might be something that they want more information on, then we can move forward from there. So if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, then please jump onto the Baton Simulations LinkedIn page. Southern Hemisphere, jump onto ours, DAS Consulting Australia, and you'll be able to see when the open sessions open up. And we'll be obviously sending out marketing material on that via LinkedIn so that people can register and have a look.
Oh, that sounds great, and I really like. Once again, I do thank you for coming in today and letting us understand, discover, and learn a bit more about this.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's another way that customers that are SAP customers can actually go, I can take a bit more of the worry out of it. I just need to approach it properly, and readiness is readiness as far as I'm concerned. And if you are ready, then when the SI comes in, you get value out of your software. There's no bad software. It's just the way we've actually thought about it, deployed it, and built it is usually what the problem is. And so, so thank you for being able to share that with us today.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well,
for that,
thanks
Wayne.
for having us along, Wayne.
Thanks,
You just got to remember, you can never be too ready.
Thank you very much, and I agree with that.